Hey everyone, in today's tutorial we are going to create this magical crystal scepter in Blender. I'll walk you through the entire process from modeling to texturing to adding this smooth spinning animation. So let's begin this tutorial. So let's first open our reference image, and you can find it in the description below. So just Shift A and Image and Reference, and then you can just select your reference and bring it in. And once you have that, you can come here to this image and then check opacity, and you can bring this a bit down. And then we can bring it a bit back in the y-axis. And let's go to front view. So let's first model this moon here. So let's first open a mesh and circle, and we can bring it up. Let's go to edit mode and vertex select, and we can scale it down. And let's rotate it on the x-axis, so rx and 90. And let's go back to our vertex select and let's first align it. And let's also make this to the center. So let's move this image on the x-axis a bit. Let's go back to edit mode and let's make this a bit bigger. And let's go to our C, circle select, and we can select these vertices and X and vertices. And now we can just convert it to a curve. So right click and convert and curve. And once you have that, we have these curve properties here. And we can scroll down to geometry and to bevel. And then we can give it some depth, somewhere about here. Or let's make it a bit bigger. Somewhere about here should be good. And we can also fill the caps. And let's go to edit mode and select these both vertices here. And let's activate our proportional editing and set it to connected only. And now we can press Alt and S to scale it down. And let's make it a bit bigger. And we can scale it to somewhere about here until you have a shape that you like. And let's convert it back to a mesh. So right click and convert to mesh. And let's select everything and let's make it a bit thinner. And we can turn this off, and S and Y. Somewhere about here should be good. Maybe not too thin, just a little bit. And right click and shade smooth. And let's make these a bit smaller, so we can go to our X-ray mode and select these. And also this one by holding Shift. And go to your period key, or you can go up here and individual origins. And now you can just scale it down. So just S and just scale it a bit more down. So I think this should be good. And also let's give it some subdivision. So you can press Ctrl and 2, or you can go up here and just search for your subdivision modifier. So let's make this star here, and we can just select this moon and Shift S and cursor to select it. And let's add a plane in RX 90, and let's make it smaller. And let's select this edge here and let's scale it down. And we can also select this edge and bring it down a bit, and we can scale it more up. And we can make this a bit smaller. And let's just extrude it on the Z-axis, so E and Z. And we can make it a bit bigger and then just scale it down. And we can also give it a loop cut in the middle, so just Ctrl R and one loop cut here. And once we have that, we can just select everything and give it some thickness. So about here should be fine. And let's make this point here a bit smaller, so we can select these both faces. Go to your face select and let's select them. And we can also select these down here and press the period key and median point, and we can just scale it down, so S and Y. And next we can select this edge here, so just Alt and click it, and also this one. And we can scale it a bit more outwards. And let's add a mirror modifier and set it to the y-axis, and as you can see, it is not looking right. So what we have to do is select everything and let's move it a bit more up. And don't forget to enable your clipping so that these stars are connected. And then we can just rotate them, R and Y 90. And let's scale it a bit more down, so S to make it a bit smaller, and S and X to make it a bit bigger. Something about this. And next we can make these smaller ones, so just Shift D and copy it, and then just rotate it a bit. let's go to edit mode and scale this one on the y-axis. And next, let's copy it and just rotate it a bit to somewhere about here. And let's make these smaller ones, so we can just copy this one and rotate it. And let's go to edit mode and let's make it smaller. And let's copy it again and we can rotate it. Something about this should be good. And let's make this little crystal here. So let's open a plane again and RX and 90. And let's bring it down and we can just scale it again. And let's bring it in place to somewhere about here. And we can go to our X-ray mode by holding Alt and Z. It doesn't have to be perfectly fit to this image here. It is just so for reference. And next we can just scale this more down. And also this one, like the same as above. And just extrude it up on the Z-axis. And we can give one more loop cut here. So Ctrl R and one loop cut. And let's scale it a bit more up to somewhere about here. And this also more. Until you are happy with your shape. And once you have that, we can bring it more in place. So let's bring it more forward. And let's give it some thickness and also one loop cut in the middle. And again, select everything and E to extrude. We can also make one loop cut here and then scale the edges. So let's hold these edges by Alt and Shift and click them. And then just S and Y to make them a bit smaller. We can also make this one here a bit smaller. So we can select these both vertices here and S and Y. And also these ones. And let's make these other parts here. So we can come back here and what we can do, we can just select these faces here. So Shift D and P selection. And then we have the same faces here as the crystal. And then we can just add a mirror modifier again. So we can just give it some loop cuts to somewhere about 6. And we can select these top vertices here and let's go to 1. So let's go to our edit mode and let's bring it more out by G and X to somewhere about here. And now we can just extrude them. So let's go to 1 and just extrude it a bit to something that you like, something about this. And let's give it some thickness by Alt and E and extrude faces along normals. Then we can give it some thickness to something about this. And once we have that, we can give it some subdivision. So let's give it some subdivision, and as you can see, it doesn't have this good of a form. So what we can do, we can select this edge here and we can bevel it. So let's bevel it, Ctrl and B. And let's bring it more outwards, something about this. And then right click and shade smooth. And let's create this crystal down here. So this is pretty easy, you just have to select this one and copy it. So Shift D and RX and 180. And let's bring it a bit down. And let's scale it. And we can scale it more on the Z-axis to make something different. To make like a smaller shape. And let's bring it to place. And now we can make this small ribbon here. And let's select the smaller crystal and Shift S and cursor to select it. And then we can just select a plane again. And RX and 90. And we can scale it down. And enable your proportional editing. And we can go to X-ray mode to see it better. And for that we can just select everything and S and Z to make it smaller. And S and X to make it smaller on the X-axis. And let's bring it in place. Let's make it a bit bigger. And we can give it a loop cut in the middle and make it smaller. And also maybe one here and just scale this a bit more up. More on the Z-axis. And let's give it some thickness again. And next we can select these ones here and we can give this one a loop cut like this. And let's select them. And we can bevel them. And let's bring it down on the y-axis to something about this. Next we can give it some subdivision. Now you can see it pretty much lost its shape. So what we can do, we can just make some more loop cuts like this. Or you can leave the shape like this if you like. And we can also scale it a bit more on the Z-axis, so let's scale it more. And let's bring it in place. We can cursor to select it, and again we can just add a plane and just make it smaller. And you can stay in edit mode and move it to the right. And we can go to X-ray mode to see it better. And let's make everything a bit smaller. And let's place it. Scale it more on the X-axis. And we can select this one here. And let's extrude it. So E to extrude. And let's make it bigger. And you can also bring it more down. Extrude again. Make it bigger. And we can extrude it one more time. And then make it a bit smaller. on the ends. And we can also rotate it a bit. And we can make it a bit smaller, like this. And once we have that, we can extrude it to give it some thickness. And next we can make one loop cut in the middle, and we can select this edge here, and we can bring it more outwards. And let's give this some subdivision. And we also have to place it more and place it a bit in the back to something about here. And as you can see here, it is a bit too big, so we can fix that. So let's go to our vertex select, and we can select these vertices and our proportional editing, and we can just scale it a bit more down. And we can come out of X-ray mode to see it better. Something about this should be fine. And now we can add also a mirror modifier again and shade smooth. And we have to select these both edges here, so we can select one and shift to select the other one, and G and Y, and then just scroll down in your proportional editing, but not too much, otherwise it is clipping like this, so just a tiny bit. And we can give it more loop cuts, so let's give it like 2 loop cuts, and we can select one edge by holding Alt and double G to move it a bit down, and also the other one and move it a bit up. And now you see we have more details here. And as you can see, these both edges are clipping, so we can just select this edge here and move it a bit more on the front. And let's make these ribbons down here, so we can just go to 1. So again, we can just select a plane again and RX90 and scale it down. And let's just make it smaller, and we can move it below. So let's move on the x-axis to something about this, and G and X to about here. And we can rotate it a bit and bring it up into place. And let's move it behind the ribbon, so something like this. Something like this. And let's select this edge here, and we can go back to S, and we can go back to X-ray mode, and then just bring it down, so extrude it. And we can scale it a bit more. And we can rotate it and give this a shape that you like. So just extrude it again and rotate it and make it bigger. And once we have that, you can select this edge here and E and Y. And again, you can go to 1 and X-ray mode to see it better. So again, extrude it and rotate it. And now we can give it some thickness. So Alt and E and extrude faces along normals, and then just scale it inwards. Tiny bit is enough. And Ctrl 2 to give it some subdivision and shade it smooth. And now we can just make a modifier, and we have it to the other side. And let's go to toggle view to see it better. So you can just press / on your keyboard, or you can go up here to view and local view and toggle local view. So let's enable our proportional editing again. We can just select this face and bring it to the back, so G and Y to about here should be good. And we can select everything and go back. And now we have this ribbon here. We can also fit this a bit more, so we can just give a more loop cut like here, and now it looks much better. And once we have that, we can make this heart here. We can also make this a bit bigger, so I think it's a bit too small. So let's select these objects here and let's make them bigger. So we're just holding Shift, and we can select these objects, and let's S to make it bigger. And let's bring it a bit down to about here. And also these ones. And let's select everything and G and X to move it back in place. And let's select this crystal and Shift S cursor to select it. And we can select a plane and RX90 and scale it down. And let's bring it to the front. And let's make it bigger. And now we can just make a heart shape. So let's make one loop cut here and one here and also one here. And we can select these vertices and S and X. And let's select this middle one and let's bring it down. And we have to add one here and one here. And we can select these both and G and Z to make it more up, and also this one here. And we can bring this more down. And these ones are a bit more out. So something like this. And let's give one more loop cut here and bring it to this edge, and also one here. And let's give this some extrusion. So let's select everything and let's extrude it. And you can make one in the middle. And let's give it some subdivision, so Ctrl 2 to give it some subdivision like this, and right click and shade smooth. And you can adjust your hard shape as you like. So go to X-ray mode and we can select these edges here, these vertices, and we can scale it a bit more. And now we can just place it. So let's bring it a bit more down, so to this crystal here. And let's go to side view and let's move it on the y-axis to about here. And now we can just add a sphere here. So right click and mesh and just UV sphere, and let's scale it down. And let's place it. And right click, shade smooth. And now we can make this crystal here. So let's shift S and cursor to select it, and we can select the plane again. And let's bring it down. And let's make a shape that we like. So one here, one loop cut here, and let's scale this down. And let's bring this way up and we can scale it. And let's extrude it again, so just E to extrude it, and we can give it one subdivision here. And now we can just scale it up, and we have something like this. And let's place it. And now we can make one smaller crystal here, like this one here. So again, a plane, and rotate it, and scale it down. And you can make one loop cut in the middle, and one in the middle like this, and then select these ones here, and by holding shift and S and Z. And once we have that, we can just extrude it. And now we can give it some bevel. So let's give it a bevel modifier and make this way down. And what we can do next, we can just select these faces here by holding Alt and click this edge here, and Shift D and P selection. And now we have this object, and we can select everything and S and Y to make it smaller on the y-axis. And let's give it some thickness again, so extrude faces along normals. And now we have that, and we can just bevel these edges here, so we can go to edge select, and let's select this edge here by holding Alt, and also these ones here, so Alt and Shift. And let's go to 1, and we can just bevel them. And 1 is enough, so it fits to this crystal. So something about this should be good. And select this crystal, Shift S and cursor to select it. And let's add a plane again, and we can scale it down. And this time we will not rotate it, so we just place it and scale it a bit. And edit mode, and then just move it to the x-axis and rotate it. And let's place it more, and let's scale it on the y-axis. And we can select this edge here, and we can make it a bit smaller. And now we can just extrude it to a shape that you like. Something about this, and we can give it some thickness again. And a subdivision modifier and shade smooth. And now we can make one loop cut here. And also let's give one loop cut in the middle so that it's not too thin. And a mirror modifier. And right click, shade smooth. And we can select this edge and bevel it a bit. And if you don't like your shape, you can just use your proportional editing, so you can just select this edge here, and you can just shape it as we want. And let's make this rounded object here, so we can just add a curve. Let's add a circle, and let's make it smaller. And we can select these both vertices here and just bring it up to about this and make it smaller. And now we can go back to our curve properties, and we can come here to geometry, give this some depth to about this. And we can make this a bit, and we can make it a bit smaller. And bring these vertices more up. And we also have to place them, so let's place these objects here. And we can make this a bit smaller on the y-axis, so S and Y. And let's make this bigger crystal here, so we can just open a plane again and scale it down. And we can give this one loop cut here, and let's scale this down here. And also let's scale this up here. And you can press double G to move this down. And we have to give one loop cut in the middle, and let's give this some thickness. And one loop cut in the middle like this. And let's select these edges here. And let's scale it. And let's select this middle edge and scale it on the y-axis. And we can make a shape here, so we can just add a loop cut and double G to move it in place, and Ctrl B to bevel it, and Alt and E extrude faces along normals, and we can scale it inwards a bit, do something about this. And now we can add a sphere, so let's add a sphere. Or you can just copy this one here and bring it down, and then we can scale it a bit. And again we can choose a curve here, so let's add a circle and bring it in place and scale it down. And this time we have to bring these more downwards, so let's bring them down, so G and Z. And let's give this some thickness, so let's go to curve properties and then give some depth to about here. And we can bring it down to fit on this object, and we can select both and then bring it up. And we have to bring these in place, so let's bring this more down, so G and Z to bring it down. And let's select this crystal, and we have to place it on the y-axis, so about here. And now we can just open a circle, so mesh and circle. And let's bring it to this sphere and scale it. And we can just extrude it down, so E and Z, to a length that you like, maybe something about this. And if you don't like the thickness of it, you can just select everything and S and Shift and Z to make it thinner. Then we can create these objects here. So for that we just Shift S, cursor to select it, and let's open a circle again, and we can scale it. And then we can just go to vertex select and extrude it down. And let's fill this, and also up here, and we can scale this down. And we can just give this like a random shape that we like. So we can maybe scale this a bit more, and we can also extrude it a bit and scale it a bit. And right click and shade smooth, and let's make it smaller. And we can also give this some subdivision, and what we have to do, we can select this face and eye to insert, and also this one here. And we can also give this some bevel, so we can just hold these edges and Ctrl B to bevel it. And we can just copy it and RX 180. And then we can just place it. And we can make this a bit smaller than the other one. And let's make another one here. And we can give this a different shape. So we can go to toggle view and select this face. And we can also enable our proportional editing, and we can then just make a shape that we like, so maybe something like this, and I to insert this face. And we can make it also a bit smaller on the z-axis, so let's make this a bit smaller. And let's make some details down here, so let's add a loop cut to here, and also another one on top, and another one here, down here. And we can select this edge in the middle, so just press Alt and click this edge and scale it. And then we can just select this edge and G and Z to move it more down, and right click, shade smooth, and Ctrl 2 to give it subdivision. And now we can bevel this edge, so let's bevel it. And we have to give this a bit more loop cuts, so let's give this more loop cuts. And now we have a much better shape. And now we can make this object here that goes around it. So we can select this edge and cursor to select it. And let's open a circle and RX90 and edit mode and let's scale it. And then stay in edit mode and move it to the right to about here, and we can make it smaller. And we can also bring it a bit more down. And now we can give it a screw modifier, so let's search for screw. And as you can see, it is the wrong direction, so let's change it to X direction, or Y direction is the right one. And next we can give it more iterations, and then we can come here to the screw and we can move this a bit more up. And for that you can hold your shift key and it is much better to control. And I think it looks a bit too big, so we can scale it down. So we have to go in edit mode and scale the circle. And then we can just move it closer to about here. And let's bring this closer to this object. And once you're happy with your result, you can just Ctrl A to apply this modifier. And now we can select this ring here and fill it. And we can also make it smaller, so S and X to make it smaller. And we can also move it more in to hide it to something like this. And then we can select this edge and double G to move it a bit. And also down here. So let's select it by holding Alt. Let's make it smaller at the X-axis. And G and X to move it in. And we can select this edge and double G. So let's make a small subdivision. And next we can make this crystal down here, and this should be not too difficult. And for that we can select a cube and make this smaller, and let's place it. And let's go to edit mode and let's make one loop cut here, and let's select this face and we can bring it down and let's scale it down. And let's select this face up here and we can extrude it up and let's scale it. And we can select this edge and let's bring this more up. And let's select this edge and dissolve edges. I think like this it looks better. And we can match the size to maybe about here. And next we can give a loop cut here and one here. And let's go to edge select and holding Alt and let's select these edges here and Alt and Shift. And let's just scale them down, so S and Shift and Z to something about this. And if you like, you can add a bevel modifier, so just bevel. And now it looks much more like a crystal. And we can also make this a bit more longer and more pointier a bit. So we can select these faces and then just G and Z to make it a bit more bigger. I think it is a bit too small. And let's create these rounded objects here. So we can come here and then let's select this crystal and Shift S, cursor to select it. If this object looks too thin, you can just go to edit mode and Alt and S. And you can give it some more thickness. And let's make these bigger ribbons, so we can just add a plane and make it smaller. And let's go to edit mode and we can place it and rotate it. And we can select this edge here and then just extrude it until we have something, a shape that we like. And once we have that, we can make it a bit bigger, S and Y. And let's give this like 2 loop cuts and let's make it a bit bigger. And next we can select these faces and X and faces. And let's again add a mirror modifier and we can give this some thickness again. So extrude faces along normals. And Ctrl 2 to give it subdivision and shade smooth. And next we can just select these faces and let's scale them. So let's just enable our proportional editing and scale it on the Y-axis. And let's go to 3 and X-ray mode and we can just place it. And next we can twist it, so we can select these faces up here. And enable your proportional editing and R and Z. And you can just twist it like a shape that you like. To maybe something like this should be fine. And now we can make this object up here, so Shift S, cursor to select it. And RX90, edit mode, and let's place it and mirror modifier. And we can go to X-ray mode and then just place it again. And make it smaller on the Z-axis. And next go to edge select and select this edge and we can extrude it. And as you go, you have to make it a bit bigger and rotate it. And once you're happy with your shape, you can again give this some extrusion and one loop cut in the middle and subdivision and right click, shade smooth. Next we can select these faces, so let's select these faces and let's go to 1 and R and Z to rotate them, and don't forget your proportional editing. And then you can just bring it a bit more on this side. So let's bring it a bit more inwards to about here. And we can also make these ends a bit smaller, so let's make them much smaller. And lastly, we can create this ribbon here, and it is connected with the sphere and this heart, so we can just select this sphere and cursor to select it in the plane, and let's rotate it again and make it smaller and bring it to the side and bring it in place and rotate it a bit. And as you can see, it is pretty thin here, so we can select this edge and make this thinner. And let's extrude it and make it bigger. And don't forget to rotate it. And once we have that, we can extrude it on the y-axis. And then we can go to 1 and X-ray mode. Next we can go to toggle view and select these both edges and let's bring them together. So these ones and S and Y and proportional editing and A and thickness and Ctrl 2 to give it subdivision and shade smooth, and let's give this one here one more loop cut and let's go to 3 and let's place it. And as you can see, it is not thin enough and we have to bring these more closer. So let's select these faces here on the front and select them. Let's go back and S and Y to make it more closer. And next we can select these edges here and also these on the back and Ctrl B to bevel them. And first it is too close together, so we have to move this a bit more out. So let's select these faces. And we can go back and let's move this a bit more out so it is not intersecting. So something like this. And now we can again select these faces here. And then just G and Y to bring it more in. As much as it goes, so something like this. And we'll have to make one loop cut here. And we can also go to 2 and let's select this whole edge here and scale it down. So just scale it. And now we can just bring it more in. And we can make this whole ribbon a bit bigger. And then add a mirror modifier. And let's make these down here. So let's again a plane and rotate it. And we can place it and rotate it again. And once we have that, we can give it a mirror and extrusion, subdivision, and let's give this one more loop cut here and shade smooth, and also loop cuts up here. So just one here and maybe one in the middle. And next we can just select these faces down here and go to 1 and proportional editing and R and Z. And now we can just rotate it to something about this. And we can also bring it more in if you like. So maybe something like this, also pretty nice. And once we have everything set up, we can do some minor adjustments. So let's, for example, bring this heart and ribbon more down. And also the other part. So let's hide this reference image. And let's bring them a bit more down, so we can just G and Z and bring them to about here. And we can also move these ones down here. So let's go to 1 and let's move them also down. And this also, you can make it a bit bigger. I think it is a bit too small. And you can also scale it on the x-axis, so S and X. And then you can just place it. And here we can also adjust it a bit, so let's adjust this. So we can make one more loop cut here. And we can also select this face and scale it. So let's go to toggle view to see it better. So we have to select both faces, so this one and also this one. And let's go back and S and Y again. And let's go to 1 and G and X to move it a bit more together. And now it looks much better. And we can move these crystals a bit more down too, to about here. And let's make this heart a bit wider, so S and Y, and we can make it a bit wider. Let's also fix these ribbons here, so we can go to toggle view again with our slash key. And let's select these faces here and S and Y. And let's make them much smaller. And we can also bring it in place. And let's go to edit mode again and G and Y. And let's move this in to about here. And here it is coming through, so we have to fix that. And let's go to front view and let's make this a bit smaller so it is not coming through. And now we can just do some minor adjustments until we are happy. And we can align this heart maybe a bit more, so let's make this, so G and Y to bring it more to the back. And also here, as you can see, these are intersecting and we can fix that. So let's go to edit mode and we can select this edge here. So let's go to edge select and select this edge by holding Alt. And let's go to 1 and our proportional editing. And we can just move this a bit more outwards to about here. And once you're happy with everything, we can move on to the materials. So let's grab this window down here and let's change it to shading editor. And we can also open a new window here. So let's make that. And first we have to add a camera. So let's add a camera and bring it to the back. And Alt and R to reset the rotation and R, X and 90. And then you can press 0 to go to your camera view. And we can come up here and change the resolution to 1080 and 1920. And also we can change the focal length of the camera. So let's do that. And here we can make the focal length a bit more bigger to maybe something about 80, and now we can bring it more to the back and just adjusting it. And we don't need the reference image anymore, so we can just hide it, and now we see it much better. And we can also hide the overlays and this menu here, so let's press T to hide it. And let's also parent this to an empty, so we have just these loose parts here and we have to parent it. So what we can do is open a empty, so we can open a cube and adjust the size a bit smaller. And let's bring it to the center of this object, so let's hide the camera. And we can adjust it maybe to this heart here, or maybe just a bit more down to this. Let's make it to this little crystal here. And we can select everything by pressing A, but you have to disable the camera so it is not selected. And lastly, the empty. If you see it is orange, it means it is parent to this empty. And Control P and Object and keep transform. And now when we select this empty, we can just move it around and everything will move with it. And now we can just rotate it a bit, so we can go to front view and rotate it a bit like this. And let's first do the materials, so we can change it to our material preview. And now we can see the materials, so let's zoom it more in. And we can use the image that I created, and we can do the same materials, or you can just use another color, so whichever color you like. So let's first select this moon and press new, and we can give it a transmission, so let's make the transmission all the way up. And let's first open a HDRI so we can see it better, so environment texture and open your HDRI. And you can find the HDRI in the description below. So here we can change it to our render view, so let's go up here and change it. And as you can see, it is pretty bright, so we can make the strength a bit down. Let's bring it slightly down to 0.6, and now we can see it better. And for all these patterns, I have used a noise texture, so we can use a noise here and also a color ramp. And we can connect the color ramp to the base color and the factor of the noise texture to the factor. And now we can bring the scale a bit more up, and you can also add some distortion and maybe a bit more roughness and some detail. And here we can use more colors, so we can add some colors like this. And you can choose a color that you like. So here I used something like a blue color and some purple color and maybe another blue color. And let's also again choose a purple color. And let's change this color here a bit more to another blue, to maybe like this. And we can make it a bit brighter. I think it is a bit too dark. So let's change the value, we can make it a bit higher. And now you see it is not that looking good, so we can make this a bit bigger. So let's make the scale a bit bigger of the noise, so it is not too small. And we can just bring these values a bit more however we like, and you have just to play around until you find something that you're happy with. So maybe something like this, I think looks pretty cool. So just experiment a bit and play around with the colors until you find something that you are satisfied with. And once we have that, we can select the order part. So let's select the sphere and these objects here, and also these ones. And also the star here. And once you have everything selected, lastly select the moon and Ctrl L and link materials. And now everything has the same material. What we can also do is select this noise texture and Ctrl T. So let's change the object to the vector. I think it looks much better. And for the ribbon, I used another texture, so we can use the new and we can name it ribbon. And for that, I just used a purple color. So you can choose a color that you like. And what I used here was a metallic. So let's put the metallic all the way up and we can make it less saturated. Do something about this. And let's select the other part and we can use the same material. And let's add a bump texture so we can give it a bit more details. And also a magic texture. And connect the color into the height. And as you can see, we have some patterns here. And let's increase the scale to maybe something about 20,000. And let's change the distance to a 0.1 and the strength to 0.1 also. And we can make it maybe a bit bigger, so let's make it to 30,000. And I think this looks fine, we can leave it at that. And for the heart, I used also just a color that we like, maybe like a purple color. And for the heart, I just used a metallic texture, like this. And you can also give some variations, so we can maybe make this a separate material. And you can just press this copy button, and you can name it crystal. And you can also disconnect it and just copy one color here, like Ctrl C and Ctrl V to paste it. And then you have like a different kind of color here. And let's tweak it more around until we find something we're happy with. And I forgot this one here, so we can use the same as this ribbon here. So let's select also this ribbon and hold shift, and then lastly this one here. And don't forget this part in the middle. And lastly this, and Ctrl L and link materials. And now it has the same material as the ribbon below. And let's do the animation, and then we can move on to the compositing. So let's make this tool here and go to 1, and we can add another empty. Shift A and another cube, and we can move it to the right. So let's move it here and make it a bit smaller. And you can make 2 different animations. So the first one you can make it spin around its own axis like this. Or you can just make it spin on the Z-axis. So let me first show you the first method. So for that we can choose this empty, and let's go to our constraints. And let's add a copy rotation. And we can target this empty here. And change the owner to the local space. And then we can just rotate this empty, and we have this rotation around our own axis like this. And let's go to our timeline here, and we can go to 0 and start at 0. And the animation can be 120 frames. And we can go here to our object properties, and now we can set some keyframes. So let's make one keyframe here. So let's press I, and then we can go to frame 120, and we can make 2 rotations. So 360 plus 360 and enter, and then I again to set a keyframe, and then we can just play it. And as you can see, it spins a bit too fast, and also it is set to Bezier, so you can change that by pressing T. and change it to linear, and then it has the same speed. And if you want to make it slower, we can go here to the output properties, and we can come here to the frame rate and time stretching, and we can come here to this new and tap into 100. And now if you play it, it is much slower, like this. And the second method is we can come here and make a full copy. So here and full copy, and now we have two scenes. So the first one is the first animation, and this would be the second animation. So we can just delete this cube, and then we can just make a keyframe here. So let's make keyframe on the rotation, and then we can go to the last one here, and let's change it back to our 100 so that it's not so confusing. And if you can't see your keyframe, you have to scroll up with the middle mouse button. And let's go to 120, and then we can make two full rotations. So let's go again to our properties, and let's just make the z-axis to 360 plus 360, and let's press I to enter. And now you see it is spinning around the z-axis like this, and it is a bit too fast, and also it is set to Bezier. So we can make t and again to linear, and then it has the same speed. And let's again go to our output properties, and we can come here to this time stretching and tap into 100. You can also make a fast animation, but I think a slower one looks much better. And now we have finished the animation, and we can move on to the compositing tab. So let's go here to compositing and enter hide this menu and check use nodes, and we first have to make a render so we can see it here, and we can add a viewer node. So let's add a viewer node and connect the image to the image, and as you can see we have no image, so we first have to render one. So let's make the samples do something like 300. So let's go up here and we can make it darker. So let's put the strength to something like, let's make a backdrop, so we can make Shift S and cursor toward origin, and let's add a plane and scale it up. Edit mode, and let's select this edge and ENZ to move it up, and you can select this edge and bevel it a bit, and right click shade smooth and Ctrl B to see just this frame here. And let's make the strength of the HDRI just to 0.1, and we can choose the backdrop, and let's go back to shading editor, and let's make a new material and name it backdrop, and we can make the roughness all the way up, and let's make it darker. We can also give it maybe a slight color like this. And we also have to add some emission, so let's go to this node here and let's go to emission, and we can set it to A2, and we have to connect all this to the emission. So let's make that. Connect the color into the emission, and now it is more glowing like this. And also this crystal down here, we can copy this color here, so Ctrl C to copy the color, and let's go to emission and make this also A2, and let's paste this color into here. And we can also give this some bump. So we can just add a bump node and connect it to the normal and a noise texture. Connect the color into the height and Ctrl T. And don't forget your node wrangler. You need to go to edit preferences and check node wrangler in the add-ons. And then we can make the scale much higher to something like this, or the strength to 0.5. So let's make this color a bit more saturated, and also these ones here. And let's bring the strength of the emission a bit more down, so that we can see the colors a bit better. So maybe something like 0.3 or even a 0.2, but I think a 0.3 is good. And also down here, don't forget this crystal down here, and we can make it just a 0.3 also. And let's also change the color to something more brighter, so maybe change the value more up, and let's make it less saturated so we can see it better. And also for the background, you can make it much lighter. And we can also give some emission to the ribbon, so we can go down here and change the strength to 0.1, and we can give this here some color. And let's make one test renders, and we can go up here to render and render image. And now you can just save your image, and we can go to compositing, and let's add a viewer node. So Shift A and search for view, and then a glare node. And let's put it in here and connect the image to the image of the view node. And now we can see the image, and as you can see we have these streaks here, but we want to make it blue. So let's set it to bloom and we can play around a bit. Don't forget to check loose nodes, and up here you can use this background here and you can press V to zoom it out. And once we have that, you can tweak around the threshold. If you make it lower, it glows a lot, so like this. You can make this look if you like it, or you can make it a bit more subtle. I think a 0.8 is pretty nice and you can leave it at that. And you can also add another glare node, so let's make another one. We can leave it at the streaks and make the threshold a bit not too high, so maybe just a subtle effect. I think 1.1 is nice, and then we have a bloom and the streaks. And for the render settings, I would recommend 300 samples and denoise. And we can come down here to performance and you can check all of this here and persistent data. And for the color management, I have set it to AGX and very high contrast. I think it looks pretty nice. And also for the settings for the animation, you can come here. Don't forget your output folder, so just make another folder. You can click here and make a folder for the animation and save it there. You can either leave it at FFmpeg or you can change it to PNG. If Blender crashes, then the video is lost, so you can just set it to PNG and then the PNGs are saved and you can just continue where it stopped. But if you have a good PC and it will not crash, then you can leave it at FFmpeg, change Matroska to MPEG 4, and then you just have to go up here to render and render animation. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope you could learn something new and thank you for watching, and I see you in the next one. Bye!